given the appearance that she was in mourning, so much so that the associate attorney to whom she was assigned to help hadn't dared ask for an update on his proposal, let alone when she'd be returning. She'd not shed one tear since finding out about her mother's death. Although sudden and unexpected, the oh my God of it all still hadn't hit her. Rebecca had been keenly aware of the gorgeous 6-foot Randall who'd stood off to the side of her shoulder, poised with a box of tissues after he'd opened the cherry maple coffin for her approval. She'd been aware that Randall had grown stockier since her graduating class had left Grace Apostle Methodist School 15 years ago in pursuit of their futures. While the funeral parlor in general held the scent of well-worn paper and the poignant wisps of something sterile, Rebecca had been aware that Randall's cologne was spiced with pine bark and spearmint. She could also tell that he'd noticed she'd dropped over 20 pounds and toned up considerably since anyone in Easton had last seen her. His admiring glances told her as much. "Take all the time you need. It's okay," Randall had instructed her. "I'm here if you need me." Rebecca had taken him at his word. She was in need. Perched on a stool in front of her mother's satin-laced lounger, she'd looked back at Randall as if in a museum, asking a guide if it was okay to touch. She'd told herself the madam was sleeping, to separate herself from reality. She toyed with her mother's favorite strand of pearls around the madam's neck, which she'd always thought would be hers, but she saw that Gail, her cousin, had obviously gotten to them first and brought them as part of the madam's final costuming. For that, she'd wept, if only to bring Randall closer. Rebecca had orchestrated a chorus of fake sobs because she was in need of a hug. She feared that being the only daughter of Madame Ava Lucas at the occasion of her death was a liability. She thought she'd escaped the rank and file and order and procession of her past life. She'd gotten accustomed to living as an adult in anonymity, not by association. Even in death, the madam still cast a shadow. Now, Rebecca felt she was expected to ascend the throne as some kind of mini-madam. Rebecca had wondered if Randall gave good hugs. Is he the kind of guy who holds sincerity in his touch? He draped one arm around her shoulder where she sat, maybe for support, or maybe to rush her along. She climbed up his torso to bury her face in his solid chest. He told her once more that it would be okay, and she prolonged their embrace as Randall hugged her straight on. Rebecca used the slightest of nuzzles into his collarbone to communicate how good his body felt up against hers. "It's okay," Randall said again, trying to break their embrace for a more appropriate hold. Rebecca held on and muttered, "I don't know what I should do. I'm just not ready to be alone in my mother's house yet. You know of any place I can hang out?" She stared at him intently and waited. Randall was first to pull away. He motioned to her with a finger that he needed a moment. She watched the wrestling match between Randall the bereavement specialist and Randall the man as he went to the door of the viewing room and looked up and down the corridor. She watched him take his cell phone from his pants pocket and with one hand apparently check his availability based on any incoming text messages. He paused, with phone still in hand, before returning to Rebecca's side. The man had won out. The look of sincerity had been replaced with opportunity. He told her he was going straight home and that she could join him if she'd like. From there, Randall had appeared in a rush to close up shop for the night. He'd rolled a protective lining up over the madam's head in preparation of shutting the cover on her casket. Rebecca had diverted her gaze. She couldn't bear to look at the finality of her mother's closed coffin. That would come soon enough. She'd fallen into his frame for support as soon as he was finished. He melded into her as if it were his civic duty to comfort her at all cost. Rebecca followed him to a nearby Hardee's to grab a bite to eat before proceeding to his small brick house off of Sinwood Drive. She knew not to bring him back to the madam's house, for fear her mother would haunt her for the rest of her life, or at least for the extent of time she decided to hide out at the family estate. She'd questioned herself, as always, on the drive over as to why she needed to hold on to him, to hold on to someone. She wouldn't have been